Hi guys! I've had so many requests to do a video talking about why I chose to have a natural birth after having a medicated birth with my first. This is only going to be my experience. This isn't going to be a very factual video, which I would like to do one of those eventually too, but I didn't have time to pull up all the facts and stuff. This is only just my experience and why I decided to have a natural birth and the comparison between the two. So medicated or unmedicated. First, let me define what I am talking about when it comes to natural birth. I know some people get offended when you say the term natural birth, what you qualify as natural and what you qualify as not natural. This is just going to be in general. I'm not trying to offend anybody. With Lilia, my first, I went to the hospital and my water had already broken and I got an epidural and I also had a drug called fentanyl that went through the IV, and the fentanyl was before the epidural. It was supposed to take the edge off contractions or something like that. And with the twins, I had no IV medication, no epidural. The only thing that you could qualify as not natural with the twins is when he broke my water and I was already at 9, almost 10 centimeters. So that's the only thing that I had during my labor that wasn't technically natural. And with Landen, my fourth baby, I had a natural home water birth. So there was no interventions. There wasn't even checking for dilation. I guess with the twins, they did check for dilation. And anyway, so I pretty much had 3 completely different labors. I had a hospital medicated labor, a hospital unmedicated labor, and then a home unmedicated labor also. I did not have to be induced for any of my pregnancies, so that could have possibly changed the outcome and my experiences if I did have to be. Well, I'm sure it would have changed the experiences if I did have to be induced, but I never did have to be induced. I had my daughter at 40 weeks exactly on her due date. I had the twins at 38 and a half weeks. I was 38 weeks and 4 days. And with Landen, I was 41 weeks and 1 day. You could watch all of my birth videos below. Go watch everything for yourself, and I'll link them all below. I'll put Lilia's birth video, then the twins, and then Landen's birth video, so you can go watch all of them and see how different they all really were. I'm gonna start with Lilia. It was my first baby. I was 18 years old. I didn't really know what to expect. With anyone who's expecting their first child, you don't know what to expect. You have no idea how it's gonna feel. You know it's gonna hurt, but nobody really tells you exactly how it's gonna be. So I always told myself I was gonna try to go natural, and if I couldn't, then I was gonna get an epidural. So I got there and I was 3 centimeters. My water had already broken and I was at 3 centimeters for a really long time, and I eventually just gave in and was like, just give me the epidural. So they gave me fentanyl right before the epidural because I wasn't dilated enough to get the epidural yet because I was only at a 3. And then they gave me the epidural, and then an hour later I was at a 9, and then I had her a couple hours later. So I never had the mindset that I was gonna for sure wanted to go natural. I just was gonna try to go natural. With the twins, I told myself there was no other option. I am going natural. And obviously with the home birth, you don't really have any other options unless you go to a hospital. For the labor itself, all 3 of them, at the time of labor itself, I was happy with my decisions at each of those times. So with my medicated labor, after I had her, I never felt like I wish I didn't get an epidural. It wasn't until I researched it later and decided that I wanted to have a natural birth experience with the twins that I was really why did I get an epidural? I really didn't need it. I really wasn't in that much pain. I wondered I could have held out more, stuff like that. But at the time and shortly after the time of each of my labors, I never regretted my decisions of getting an epidural or not getting an epidural. It wasn't until a few months after I had an epidural with my daughter that I started having really bad back pain. And I've had back pain my whole life, but this was a different kind of back pain. And it was very locally in one exact spot that happened to be right where the epidural was placed. And I talked to a bunch of my other mommy friends who had epidurals as well, and a lot of them had this same weird pain in their back. So I'm not saying it is related to an epidural, but that is my theory, is that it is related to an epidural. My mom too has the same pain, and it's just when it gets cold in this one spot, it really, really hurts. And to touch it still to this day feels like it's bruised. So I don't know if that's related at all, but that was one of the first times that I really didn't like my decision of having an epidural. And it obviously didn't change my life dramatically, but it's just a side effect that I happen to have from getting an epidural. During my labor with Lilia also, and at the time, like I said, I was pretty okay with it, but I had a side effect where I was shaking really, really badly. And I thought it was just because I was in labor, and then I asked my doctor later and he said it was because of the epidural. But when I got it, I didn't feel the pain anymore, but I was shaking so bad to the point where I was you could see it in the video, I was just shaking. I'm trying to talk about this smoothly because I have 3 different experiences that I want to get out there. So during the delivery with Lilia, which is the one that I had an epidural with, I tore and I needed 6 internal stitches, and the recovery was by far the worst recovery of my 3 deliveries. It was significantly worse than the labor itself, and that was probably because I didn't feel pain I didn't feel like the bad pain during the labor itself because I had the epidural. So with Lilia, I pushed for about 12 minutes, and I don't think that's including the practice pushes. I'm not really sure. I don't think it does. And she was out in like four pushes. With the twins, Kyson was out in 1 push. Aiden was pulled out because he was breech, and so his hand was like up to here inside of me. It was, yeah, watch the video. During the delivery with the twins, I did not tear. Baby B was breech. Their birth was by far the most painful for obvious reasons. The recovery was amazing. It was a piece of cake. It was like a walk in the park. It was perfect. Like, I was up and walking. With Lilia, I couldn't even walk for like 2 days, it seemed like, and they make you get up and walk, and I felt like I was dying. Like, I couldn't walk. After the twins, I was up and walking like an hour afterwards, and I just felt amazing. Like, it was literally amazing. With Landen, the home birth, he was out in 1 push also. I did not tear, and the recovery again was absolutely amazing. So I had no stitches. I was up and walking immediately after I got out of the pool, and I was just walking around fine. So the main difference that I have had with having a medicated birth and an unmedicated birth is that with my medicated one, and you could argue that this was my first child and that's why I tore, but I really feel like I didn't have control over my body, and I didn't have control over me pushing. I couldn't feel pushing because I still had the epidural. Also, half of my body started becoming less numb than the other half. So that was really distracting, and I wasn't able to focus as much on pushing. 4 pushes is obviously still really good, but compared to the 1 pushes, it's still a long time. I forgot to add also with Landon, when he was born, I did have something that was called, like, she called it a skid mark, and she said it was because his hand, when he was born, was up like this. So when he was coming down, his elbow like made a skid mark on my inside, but I never noticed it. It didn't like ever hurt like out of the ordinary, and I didn't need stitches because of it. It was just because everything happened so fast and his arm was in a really weird position. So overall, between the 3, after I had my 2 natural births, or actually even after I just had my first natural birth, I would never go back to having a medicated birth. That is just my opinion, and I know a lot of people have different opinions and different experiences and just different everything because everyone's different. So for me personally, having a natural birth and having a medicated birth are completely different. You get this, I've heard people call it like a natural birthing high directly after you have your natural birth, where you feel like you are like king of the world or queen of the world. You just literally feel like high off of happiness. I never felt that after my epidural birth. I felt like after the birth itself, everything went downhill as far as my recovery. It was like once the epidural wore off, everything really hit me on how much pain I was really in, since I didn't experience the birth itself. If you're doing it natural and you don't have an epidural and you don't have the other drugs, you feel all of that pain, and it's all for something. And then once you have the baby, it's like the pain is gone, and it's just amazing. It's like, hallelujah. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's really something that you have to experience to understand. The one thing that I really, really, really loved about having a natural birth is after both times that I did it, I was just like, wow, I cannot believe I just did that. I can't believe my body just did that. Just in my personal opinion, my natural births were so worth it. And if I ever had another baby, which I'm not, I would choose a natural birth in a second. Those are my experiences. I feel like the only main huge difference between having a natural birth and having a medicated birth was the recovery. So yeah, that's kind of just like of the differences between my births. And originally the reason why I chose to have a natural birth after having an epidural, because at that time the only bad thing that I had to say about a medicated birth was that it made my back hurt from the epidural. Other than that, it was like totally fine, and I never had any problems with it. The thing that really made me research it and really made me rethink it was when I got pregnant with twins, and the C-section rate around here is like almost 90%. And I really didn't want to have a C-section that wasn't medically necessary. And then once I started researching that the more interventions you have, the more likely you are to have a C-section, that's when I really told myself that I'm going to do this. Anyway, that's pretty much the rundown of the differences between my pregnancies and what I prefer Go ahead and leave your experiences below. I would love to read everyone else's because every birth experience is different, and that goes for every child that you have, every person. Everyone just has different experiences. And go ahead and share below and talk to each other. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I will talk to you guys for my next video. Bye.